Welcome to Nerd History. Today we talk about one of the most famous mythical entities. Let's explore the history of the vampire, from ancient Mesopotamia to medieval Europe. Not Hollywood vampires, not shiny ones, but the dark, hungry spirits that haunted human imagination for over 4,000 years. From dusty clay tablets to graveyards in 13th century Serbia, this is the real story of the undead. Let's begin. The very first vampire-like beings emerge in Mesopotamia over 4,000 years ago. In Sumerian and Akkadian mythology, we find spirits like the Akimu and Utuku, restless dead who had died violent deaths or had not been buried properly. These souls roam the earth, attacking the living, draining their life force. But among these shadowy spirits, two names stand out: Lamashtu and Lilith. Unlike most spirits, Lamashtu wasn't merely a ghost or a cursed soul. She was a demon goddess, terrifying and untamable, acting on her own will. She had the body of a woman, but the head of a lion or a donkey, sharp claws, and often held serpents in her hands. Sometimes she rode a donkey while nursing monstrous creatures. Her role? She preyed on pregnant women and newborns, sucking their blood, stealing their breath, or causing miscarriages. People feared her more than many gods. To protect themselves, families would place amulets in the home, often invoking Pazuzu, a rival demon, to keep her away. Lamashtu embodied the primal fear of losing life before it even began. In that sense, she wasn't just a demon. She was an early vampire, a predator of life, a nocturnal threat that fed on the most vulnerable. And then there's Lilith, seductive, untamed, and eternal. Her roots also stretch back to Mesopotamia, where she appears as Lilitu, a wind spirit of the night, associated with disease and erotic dreams. But Lilith evolves. In Jewish folklore, she becomes something even more dangerous. According to medieval texts like the Alphabet of Ben Sira, Lilith was Adam's first wife, made from the same earth, not his rib. She refused to obey him, left Eden, and joined the realm of demons. From there, she returned to torment humankind, attacking infants, seducing sleeping men, and birthing demonic offspring. She entered homes by night, unseen, and drained vitality through desire and blood. Like Lamashtu, she too targeted children. But Lilith was also sexual, transgressive, a symbol of female independence turned monstrous by patriarchal fear. Both Lamashtu and Lilith were blamed for infant death, sleep paralysis, erotic dreams, disease, things ancient people couldn't explain. And both were among the first vampiric archetypes, entities that blur the line between demon and ghost, between seduction and death. Fast forward 1,000 years, we come across classical culture. The Greeks gave us names like Lamia, Empusa, and Mormo, feminine creatures who fed on children, seduced men, and were often linked to Hecate and the underworld. These beings blurred the line between demon and revenant. The philosopher Philostratus even described creatures that resembled vampires in his Life of Apollonius of Tyana. A woman in Corinth seduces young men and drinks their blood. Sound familiar? In Rome, lemurs and larvae were malevolent dead who returned if not buried with proper rites. The Romans celebrated Lemuria, a festival where black beans were thrown to appease angry spirits, the first ritual defense against the undead. Both cultures believed that the dead could harm the living if rituals failed. The emphasis was on ritual purity, proper death, and the maintenance of cosmic order. As Christianity spread, the fear of improper burial became a spiritual fear. Death was no longer just biological, it was moral. Sinners, heretics, suicides, and the excommunicated were seen as especially dangerous after death. From the 5th to the 12th century, we see accounts of corpses rising from graves. Chroniclers like William of Newburgh and Walter Map record tales of the revenant, a corpse seen walking at night, spreading disease and fear. If a body didn't rot, it was suspicious. If it was found bloated with blood, it was a sign that it had fed. The Church struggled to control these beliefs. It condemned such tales as superstition, but they persisted. People still opened graves, drove stakes through bodies, even dismembered the dead. The vampire was no longer just a myth. It had entered the real world as collective ritual, community panic, and burial practice. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, vampire legends exploded in the Slavic and Balkan world.
In Russia, we find the term upir, one of the earliest linguistic ancestors of the modern word vampire. In Bulgaria, the vampire is a corpse that rises from the grave to drink blood. And in Romania, the feared strigoi, spirits of the dead, return to torment the living, slipping between the world of the living and the dead. These weren't ghosts or metaphors. These were physical beings with bodies, often described as swollen, ruddy-faced, with blood around their lips. The imagery is grotesque, visceral. These creatures didn't glide through walls. They clawed out of coffins. To prevent such beings from rising again, villagers across Eastern Europe developed a series of intricate rituals. They would sometimes place iron objects in the grave, believing the metal would ward off evil. They might drive a wooden stake through the chest of a corpse, not out of superstition alone, but because they believed it pinned the body to the earth. In some cases, the dead were buried face down, so that if they awoke, they would dig deeper into the ground instead of emerging. Others had stones or bricks placed in their mouths, a macabre precaution based on the belief that vampires could chew through their burial shrouds, a symbolic act of eating life from the grave. These weren't poetic gestures. They were real practices, performed in real cemeteries, often recorded in local chronicles and religious accounts. Archaeological digs have confirmed several of these unusual burials, evidence of just how seriously the fear of vampires was taken. But why did vampire myths flourish so dramatically during this time? Because Europe was suffering. The Black Death had killed millions. Whole villages were wiped out. Famine ravaged the land. Wars tore communities apart, and social structures were crumbling. People looked to the church for answers. But religion, too, seemed powerless in the face of such devastation. When logic failed, myth filled the void. The vampire, in this context, was more than a monster. It became a social symptom, a way to explain the unexplainable: sudden death, mysterious illnesses, wasting diseases, and even the failure of crops. When nothing made sense, the idea of the undead feeding on the living brought structure to chaos. But it was also a mechanism of control. Accusing someone of being a vampire could justify punishment, violence, or even execution. The vampire, in that sense, became a political tool, a figure of marginalization. The dead became scapegoats for the fears of the living. It's only in the 18th and 19th centuries that vampires begin to appear in literature, in poems, novels, and eventually in the Gothic imagination. But that is a story for another day. For now, let's remember this. The vampire didn't begin in castles or elegant ballrooms. It began in muddy cemeteries, panicked villages, and during the plagues and collapses that haunted medieval Europe. The vampire was not just a monster. It was a social symptom, a way to explain sudden death, wasting illness, even crop failure. It was also a way to control deviance, accuse someone of vampirism, and you could justify violence. If you enjoyed this journey through ancient and medieval vampire lore, don't forget to subscribe to Nerd History.